High in the Bolivian Andes, thousands of years ago, someone began cutting stone with astonishing precision. Not roughly shaped stones, but enormous blocks with straight edges, sharp corners, channels, and astonishingly regular geometric forms. Some surfaces appear almost machine-like, and that raises a question that has fascinated archaeologists for generations. How did people working thousands of years ago create stonework that looks so radically different from ordinary ancient construction? This is Puma Punku, one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in the entire Andes. And before we ask how it was built, we need to understand where this extraordinary place actually came from. Puma Punku sits more than 12,000 feet above sea level, near the southern shores of Lake Titicaca. The air is thin, the landscape exposed, and powerful winds sweep across the plateau with almost nothing to stop them. The name Puma Punku is often translated as Door of the Puma, a fitting name for such an imposing place. The site formed part of Tiwanaku, a powerful civilization that flourished in the highlands of South America. Long before the Inca Empire, Tiwanaku developed complex agriculture, monumental architecture, roads, and sophisticated water management. Yet centuries later, the great city was abandoned, leaving its monumental stones exposed to wind, weather, and time. What remained was a landscape of enormous stones, many broken, scattered, and separated from the structures they once formed. And among those fragments are some of the most precise stone constructions ever associated with the ancient Andes. Because Puma Punku is not simply about enormous stones, it is about the details carved into them. Some of the most remarkable blocks were made from hard igneous stone, including andesite and diorite. These are not materials that simply surrender to crude cutting. They require abrasion, careful shaping, and extraordinary patience. And then there are the corners, remarkably straight, sharply defined, and deliberately geometric. Some stones contain channels and recessed features cut directly into their surfaces. Others contain openings and internal right-angle forms that look surprisingly similar to engineered components. Then, there are the famous H-shaped blocks, whose geometry allows neighboring pieces to interlock. There is no mortar filling enormous joints. Instead, the geometry itself becomes part of the structure. And some of these blocks were enormous, weighing many tons, with several among the largest stones at the site. So the mystery becomes two mysteries. How were these stones shaped, and how were they moved? The raw stone had to be extracted, shaped, transported, positioned, and assembled into monumental structures. The quarries were located many kilometers away, meaning every massive block had to cross difficult terrain. There were no modern cranes, trucks, engines, or steel lifting systems waiting on the plateau. Whatever methods they used, they had to rely on human organization, materials, leverage, and an enormous amount of labor. Archaeologists have proposed techniques involving hammerstones, abrasives, pecking, grinding, and careful measurement. None of these methods require lost technology, but reproducing the finished result at monumental scale is the fascinating challenge. Because the real question is not whether ancient people were intelligent. They clearly were. The real question is how their knowledge, labor, and techniques combine to create this extraordinary stonework. Imagine standing here while the site was alive, before the stones became ruins. Imagine thousands of people moving through a monumental complex whose stones had been shaped generations before your arrival. Then imagine the civilization disappearing, while the stones remain. That is where the mystery begins to grow beyond engineering and into questions about human history itself. Over the decades, Puma Punku has inspired theories ranging from forgotten techniques to completely unknown civilizations. One possibility is surprisingly simple. The builders were masters of techniques we have underestimated. Perhaps generations of accumulated knowledge allowed them to achieve results that seem impossible when viewed only through modern assumptions. Another theory suggests earlier construction phases may have influenced what we see at Puma Punku today. And then there are the more radical theories, claims of lost civilizations, unknown technologies, even visitors from elsewhere. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and Puma Punku does not provide definitive proof for any of them. This is where the story becomes more interesting, because the truth may be less spectacular, but far more impressive. The Tiwanaku civilization had centuries to develop architecture, agriculture, mathematics, organization, and specialized craftsmanship. What looks like a sudden technological leap may actually represent knowledge accumulated slowly, generation after generation. And that possibility creates a very different mystery. How much ancient knowledge have we simply forgotten? Not because the knowledge was impossible, but because the people who possessed it are no longer here to explain it. And that may be the most haunting fact about Puma Punku. The stones do not need aliens to be astonishing. They do not need a lost super civilization. They only require us to recognize what ancient human beings were capable of achieving. Without modern engines, without steel machinery, without computer-controlled tools, they transformed raw mountainside stone into geometry that still commands attention thousands of years later. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how advanced they were, but how little of their process survived. Their machines are gone, their builders are gone, but the stones are still here. And every precisely cut corner is a surviving fragment of knowledge from a civilization that can no longer answer our questions. Maybe the answer is hidden in techniques archaeologists are still discovering. Maybe future experiments will reveal exactly how these ancient craftsmen achieved their results. Or maybe some questions will remain unanswered, simply because the people who knew the answers disappeared long ago. Because sometimes history's greatest mysteries are not hidden beneath the ground. They are sitting in plain sight. The door of the Puma is still waiting, and it has not told us everything. Welcome to Unsealed Chapters. Make sure to subscribe for more, and thank you for watching.